There's got to be at least one book that you hated on this list. You're not blind, you read the title, you know what this video is about. Today we'll be discussing the worst books of 2020. Let me give you the most basic bitch booktuber disclaimer. These are not books that came out in 2020. These are books that I read and hated in 2020. So I basically divided these books into like 3 different sections. I don't know why, I'm just that jobless. The first section is books that I DNF'd and had high expectations for. The second section is books that I had high expectations for but still continued to read them despite of like hating them while reading them. And they were thick books. The first section is books I just had low expectations for and they stood up to their expectations. I knew they would suck and they did suck. So I wasn't really disappointed by them. Cool, let's get this started. Oh, and by the way, if any of your favorite books are on this list, tell me where I went wrong. Let me know if I read the book upside down or something. I'm gonna go through these books real quick because I want this video to be super short. So in the first section of books that I DNF'd, we have Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I picked it up because Brandon Sanderson. It's basically this sci-fi novel set in a very post-apocalyptic setting, like very dystopian and stuff. I couldn't get past like page 70 or so. I hated the protagonist. She was just so cocky and full of herself, like not even in a cute way. She was like unlikable in this annoying, I want to throw this book as far as I can way. Basically, the plot and the writing style were really good because Brandon Sanderson, but it's just the main chick, she was just so full of herself. So yeah, I DNF'd it. Next book. We have Circe by Madeline Miller. I understand that both of these books are like super famous and very much raved upon in BookTube, and they do have their respective demographics and markets. People do like them and I understand why they like them, but it just does not work for me. If I don't gel with the main character, I can't finish the book and I can't even get through them. So yeah, so same thing with Circe. It just felt like aeons just reading it. I felt like Circe. I felt like I aged while reading that book, and I couldn't get past like the 80th page or something. I thought I would like Circe because Greek mythology retelling. I love Greek mythology, and like the sole knowledge of Greek mythology I have is like from Percy Jackson books. I thought I would like it, but turns out I didn't. So yeah, DNF'd. Moving on to the second section, we have books I had high expectations for, but I was highly disappointed. First one is The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. This is a very young adult contemporary set book that deals with magical realism. I like the idea behind it, but the execution didn't work for me. I don't gel with magical realism in the first place. I just don't understand it. I'm gonna admit that I'm really dumb when it comes to magical realism. Like, I cannot get the symbolism. So if you get this book, like, let me know. I'd like to just know where I went wrong with it. But it mainly deals with this main chick's mom's depression, which I think is very cool because when you read about depression, you just read from the person suffering from it and not someone who's close to them, like their point of view. And I think that's very different. And I had like high expectations even in the first few pages. I thought, wow, this is like really cool. I have high hopes. This could be a favorite easily, but it just went downhill from there. And the fact that it felt like a debut novel while I was reading it, it just like didn't sit well with me. So the main chick, she's a painter and like she's into arts and stuff, and her best friend is, I guess, and so whenever they talk, they basically ask each other, what color do you see, something along those lines. And I just found it a little too cliche. Like, just because you're in that specific field, that doesn't mean like everything you speak or like do or your entire like world revolves around that one thing. Like, he'll be like, I don't even know if it's a he or she best friend. I just know that she had a best friend. Let's just go with he. So he just randomly goes up, like after her mom dies, like at the funeral, he shows up and he's like, what color do you see? Like, bitch, her mom died. Can you chill for a second? You don't have to be so cliche all the time. So yeah, I just thought that it was very debut. And turns out it was very debut. I found out like last week or something that it was a debut novel. Okay, so let's move on to the third category. These are books that I knew I would hate and I hated. Let's go like from the least worst book to the most worst book. Make sense? Sure it does. So the fifth book on this list is Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. I had no hope for this series after the first and second book. So Ruin and Rising is basically the third installment of the Grisha trilogy. So after I read the second one, I just thought this third one would suck ass even more. Like, I had like a tiny glimmer of hope that maybe the entire series could be redeemed by this one. The ending was so bad, I absolutely hated it. Like, the worst endings I've ever read, that was in this book. The fourth book on this list is We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Off the bat, it's not a bad book. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's not a bad book. Like, I don't hate it. I said this before, I'm going to say it again. I would give it to a 5-year-old. It's basically a non-fiction book on feminism, and I read it knowing that I wouldn't learn anything new from it, and I didn't. So yeah, I am happy I read it. Like, I'm not like hugely disappointed or anything, but yeah, next book. Next up, we have The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. A highly controversial book. People either hate it with their entire being, or they'll sell their firstborn child for it. It's just like that with this book. I hate it. I read it twice in my life. Once when I was 13 or 14 or 12, I don't remember. And then recently, during the pandemic, I liked it when I read it the first time. I also liked it when I read it the second time. But then now when I think about it, it's the cringiest book on the entire planet. I absolutely hate it. I hate the romance. I hate the writing. I like John Green as a person. Don't get me wrong. He's very cool. I watch his YouTube videos. I just don't like his writing. It's either a hit or miss for me. I started to hate this book even more after I read The Turtles All the Way Down, because I really liked that book. I'm going to feature it in the next video. I kind of realized what went wrong when I read Turtles All the Way Down. So basically, the characters in Fault in Our Stars are heavily aged up. Why did I say it like that? So I basically hated the fact that the characters in The Fault in Our Stars were extremely aged up and would not talk like normal teenagers. And he would just throw in like random words like hamartia and stuff. And immediately after he says the words, immediately after someone says like the really random word that no one uses in their daily lives, there would be like a meaning right after it. And I found it like really annoying thinking of it now. When I read it back then, I thought it was like really cool. It's basically a love story between these two cancer kids, and yeah, I guess it's not for everyone. I mean, if you really look into it, it turns out to be like really cringy and annoying and like really just not realistic in spite of it being contemporary YA. But yeah, that's that. I just don't like it anymore, and I hate the fact that I reread it, because if I didn't reread it, I don't think I would hate it as much, because I wouldn't just not remember anything. But yeah, I don't think I'll be reading any more of John Green's new releases, but I do want to try Hank Green's new books. The covers are very interesting and colorful, so yeah. Next up is So Sad Today by Melissa Broder. I have expressed my emotions on this book in multiple videos. I think I did. I absolutely hate this book with my entire soul. If I could do anything to reverse time and go back to the day I didn't read this book, I would. It's an absolutely stupid book. It shouldn't exist. She can't write. I'm sorry to say this, but she can't write. And it just felt like a first draft that hasn't been edited or even worked upon. And there was no timeline as such. It's basically a non-fiction collection of essays about Melissa Broder, the author of the book, and her life, and just basically about her. And yeah, it sucked ass. I didn't like it. It was just really annoying to be stuck in her head. And it was a very short book, I believe. I don't remember how many pages it was, but it took me like 3 or 4 days to read it. And it was just like around 100 pages, give or take. Overall, would not recommend. I don't know why I picked it up, but I did. I said that I would quickly go through these books, and I'm just like not quickly going through these books. Coming in at position 1, the absolute worst of this entire list and of my entire year, is The Butterfly Garden by Hutchison. So this one is a thriller. We basically follow these women who've been kidnapped by this guy named, they call him the gardener, and he calls them the butterflies. He basically kidnaps women between the ages of 16 to 21, I think. I don't remember. Just don't quote me on any of the details in any of these books, because I just remember stuff that I hate better than stuff that actually happened. So we basically follow how these women get kidnapped and they are abused by him. I'll tell you the biggest plot hole in a second, like the biggest plot hole ever. So after he kidnaps these women, he tattoos like this really detailed, intricate butterfly on their back, and he kind of just renames them and kind of owns them. Like, he gives them a new name and a new identity and stuff. He puts them in this actual butterfly garden, but for humans. Like, they live in one of those greenhouse things with like this beautiful landscape and like a waterfall in the side and stuff, with like actual butterflies around. And the really problematic part is that he abuses these women. They're like this, his collection, kind of his set of women. So I understand that the author wanted to kind of write a story based on the relationship between these women and how they're getting through this really tough time and how they bond over something that strips them off of their identity and their lives. But that being said, I couldn't sympathize with any of the women that were going through this entire trauma. Like, not even the main chick. The main chick, no one was necessarily annoying, but no one was necessarily appealing. Like, it's just that they were so passive, and it's one guy. There are like 21 women over here. If you really wanted to escape, you could have killed the guy. It's not that hard. 21 women against one man? Are you kidding me? That's like the biggest plot hole in the history of plot holes. I do understand that there were one or two women who actually romanticized the abuser, which was annoying as hell to read. But even then, like 18 against 1, 17 against 1, and he was a middle-aged man. He was kind of old, like on the older side of things. It's not that hard. They could have just killed him and left if they wanted to, but they didn't. And the other annoying aspect of this book that really stood out to me and like really bothered me when I read it was the fact that after the threshold of 21, the age of 21, he basically kills them. And they still don't hate him enough. I just don't get why. He kills them by he doesn't brutally kill them. He just gives them a drug kind of thing, and he embalms their bodies and he encases it and just puts it up in the hallways of that entire butterfly garden. These girls basically live amongst dead bodies, and they're okay with it. They're okay with being abused, and then they're also okay with being with dead bodies. So the last annoying aspect of the book was that the main chick, the protagonist, was narrating the entire story after it happened. And that immediately just takes off your entire curiosity and the entire thriller aspect of the thriller. Why would you narrate it in that style? Other genres of books make sense. You can actually pull off a great story if you're narrating it from after the events are done. But when you do that with thrillers, that's just straight up, everything's fine now. You have nothing to be even worried about. So what's the point? I wasn't even thrilled while reading it. It just felt like a normal ass book. So that's a wrap on the worst books I read in 2020. There aren't too many, which is kind of nice actually, because I didn't read too many books this year, just around 37 or so. So I'm not too disappointed by my disappointing reads. If any of your favorite books are on this list, don't take me too seriously. I'm entitled to my opinion just like you are. So I believe that we can still coexist peacefully. And if you do hate any of these books along with me, then yeah, let me know which books you hate out of these lists, or like out of the books you read this year. Okay, my throat is parched. I am gonna go. I hope you have an immaculate day ahead. Stay tuned for the best books of 2020 video, and don't be shy. If you hated any of these books, let me know.